There's a new, live-action, R-rated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie on the way. It's being written by Tyler Burton Smith, who worked on the Child's Play remake and Boy Kills World, and it's based on the 5-issue miniseries The Last Ronin, where Michelangelo, the last turtle alive, seeks revenge against the Shredder's grandson in a futuristic New York City. So here's 5 things I need in the new TMNT. But before we dive in, please give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and bell icon. Number 5. Rubber motherfucking suits. Hear me out. The last live-action Ninja Turtles we got was 2016's Out of the Shadows, which itself was a sequel to the Michael Bay-produced reboot 2 years prior. Those films brought the brothers to life with motion capture, the same technology that created Gollum, as well as the Na'vi in James Cameron's Avatar. In this increasingly digital landscape, that decision made all the sense in the world. But The Last Ronin, while a new story, is also familiar. Props to Paramount for rolling the dice with what's historically been a kid-friendly franchise. From the 80s animated series to last year's Mutant Mayhem, the property has mostly been one for the whole family. But that wasn't always the case. In fact, the Heroes in a Half Shell started out as a gritty, independent comic book, where The Last Ronin's plot deals with assassinating the Shredder's grandson. The very first Ninja Turtle story saw the brothers kill, yes kill, the Shredder himself. That rooftop fight to the death inspired the ending of the first film. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990, the first cinematic version of the characters, actually lifted a lot from those early books. For instance, while Raphael gets beaten into a coma by the Foot Clan in the second act, the same happened to Leo in an issue titled What Goes Around Comes Around. The 1990 film was a perfect hybrid of the toy-generating Saturday morning cartoon and its darker predecessor. And while technically PG, the shadow-heavy cinematography suggested a more adult-oriented aesthetic. So, since The Last Ronin arc echoes those initial comics, I think The Last Ronin adaptation should reflect the grittier style of that first film, a film that employed the best and brightest of the Jim Henson Company to create detailed rubber suits and lifelike animatronic masks. Honestly, literary reasons aside, it just fucking looks cool. That team did a brilliant job bringing Splinter and the Turtles to life. No disrespect to the VFX artists of recent years, but for my money, practical beats pixels any day. Not to mention the obvious nostalgia bait. If you're targeting a more mature audience, an audience old enough to remember seeing those costumes in the theater, it's kind of a no-brainer. Number 4. The right April O'Neil. Let's be honest, when it comes to Michelangelo, they're gonna Mandalorian that shit. The way Pedro Pascal mostly just does voice work for the role, they'll get a known actor for Mikey's dialogue. Then put a martial artist in one of those aforementioned rubber suits, or cover him in ping pongs for the motion capture. So you gotta cast the right actress for April O'Neil, our main human character. We've seen her as a young reporter in earlier films, and an even younger high school student in last year's Mutant Mayhem. The Last Ronin jumps ahead a couple of decades. While the comic doesn't give a specific number, her age is definitely north of 40. She might even be pushing 50. And the future that she lives in, unfortunately, is not a kind one. This is a world-weary April O'Neil, living in the underground hideout the Turtles once called home. She literally lost an arm and a leg, fighting against the dystopia that is Shredder's legacy. Besides the other 3 Turtles, her closest friends, she lost her baby daddy / love of her life, Casey Jones. While there's a lot of talented actresses in that bracket who can pull it off, I vote Amy Adams. Did the fact that she's a ginger affect my decision? Abso-fucking-lutely. But it's more than that. Aside from looking the part, Adams has been giving amazing performances her entire career, with 6 Oscar nominations to prove it. She'll give this whole reptile revenge fantasy the beating heart it needs. If anybody can look a masked mutant in the eyes and make you shed a tear, it's her. Number 3. Animated flashbacks. The Last Ronin fills in story gaps with artwork modeled after the black and white style of those early Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird books. When the film inevitably gets its own backstory, I want the animated version. Mutant Mayhem, no doubt inspired by the Spider-Verse films, went for a hand-drawn vibe over CG, and it looks fantastic. But this series skews darker. When Michelangelo tells April he went into a self-imposed exile after his family was murdered, those flashbacks should be in the rough, ink-heavy style. The Last Ronin is the last Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story. This, along with that very first independently produced issue, serve as bookends for the entire mythology. What better nod to the origin and its creators than that early art brought to life? Number 2. Badass robots. Before reaching his final target, Michelangelo battles a lot of robots along the way. There's a vast army of cyborgs and synthetic ninjas that serve as the Foot Clan for Shredder's grandson, a wide range of models with varied weaponry. I'm a sucker for cinematic robots, and would point to the ones in early Neil Blomkamp films, like Elysium and Chappie, as some of the best recent examples. They just have a worn, lived-in quality to them. Michelangelo tears through a lot of them in The Last Ronin, so you really want to see the nuts and bolts of all that carnage. Number 1. The seppuku scene. It's called The Last Ronin. The word Ronin literally means a samurai without a master, which is exactly what Michelangelo is after Master Splinter is murdered. He also lost his 3 brothers. Throughout the series, Michelangelo has conversations with the shadowed versions of Leonardo, Donatello, and Raphael. But unlike the Jedi Ghost in Star Wars, he isn't really communicating with spirits. It's all in his head. The series is just giving us a glimpse into his tortured, guilt-ridden psyche. To be honest, The Last Ronin would translate pretty easily to a PG-13 film, were it not for one brutal scene in the first issue. Injured from a mission and feeling like a failure, Michelangelo attempts seppuku, or harakiri. It's a ritualistic form of suicide, where a samurai plunges a short blade into his own belly and disembowels himself. It's absolutely grisly. But Michelangelo, the party dude, is haunted by shame and demons, and sees the act as his only option. While he's saved in this moment by April's daughter, we the readers are already traumatized, and it sets the very somber, very adult tone for the remaining 4 issues. You cannot, I repeat, cannot omit this scene in the upcoming film. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe.